Oh, are we recording? Oh, hello, everyone. I am here with a book review just for you, and I am channeling my inner feminist intersectional self so that I can accurately critique feminism from within. And I want to argue here that we need something like feminist psychoanalysis or Marxist feminist psychoanalysis to critique what I think is very problematic in today's world, which is this very one-dimensional intersectionality that cuts out the very important subject of class. Now, I want to discuss what is a book called Marxism and Psychology by Susan Rosenthal and Patricia Campbell. Now, what is discussed in this book is kind of the ideology that we can find in many respects, and it comes out of the work of Engels. So I will start. It is a feminist neoliberal psychology that works for the ruling classes by arguing that the link between sex and love is largely just a vestige of patriarchy, aka all these romantic attacks that we see on romanticism today. Rosenthal et al. Recognized way too late what Foucault argued 40 years ago, that the role of psychology is largely to instill neoliberal subjectivity, but then go on to point their fingers in the wrong directions, just as with most modern American Psychological Association intersectional groupthink. And we know it's groupthink because of all the idioms that go around, something that Foucault also talks about. I hope that feminist psychoanalysis can save us, but I'm not really sure. So Engelsian feminism characterizes the family as being a site of unpaid labor backed by the church as what the state needs to exploit the surplus labor of our hard work. However, in truth, it is an extreme neoliberalism that is working to break down the family and the community and solidarity in favor of extreme individualism. In fact, these were the last bastions of anti-capitalist rituals. And for me, if you watch my videos, you'll know that ritual is an important aspect of creating our epistemology or ontology, which largely determines our epistemological or ontological relationship to each other. See the work on the epistemological similarities of market liberalism and standpoint theory by Pills and Schoeniger. But now, largely in part thanks to the discipline of psychology and the discipline, our kin-based labor is reduced to some sort of emotional labor cost-benefit analysis, a neoliberal colonialism of the mind that has dire consequences on the concept-making capabilities of the rituals in our societies. We can see that the American Psychological Association's attack and destruction of these kin-based ties is actually just another instance of what is called in the academic literature as social reproduction. Today, even weapons companies and the CIA are releasing intersectionality videos, and we are supposed to pretend that intersectionality is somehow immune from the logic of neoliberal colonialism, when in fact, intersectionality is integral to the logic of neoliberal colonialism. We live in a delusional world. In one breath, we say our organization needs to be active in caring about inclusivity and people's emotional well-being. Many different professional advancement seminars have been done about emotional well-being at work, while we completely exclude an analysis of the daily rituals we actually are doing which do the exact opposite. Our multinational company, which cares about emotional labor now, somehow exploits massive amounts of surplus labor and maximizes economies of scale and goes and tries to find markets in newer and newer areas. So on the one hand, we care about people's emotional well-being, while on the other hand, we extract massive amount of surplus labor. That is, as long as we continue this rainbow washing with empty slogans and not following it up by walking the walk, we can go on doing what we are doing and business as usual. This is the type of empty activism that Roxane Gay's feminism advocates. It is too much emotional labor to give a shit about complicity. Post-colonial societies have no choice but to be intersectional. We have to deal with the concept of difference in post-colonial societies in some way. All of these different people are here. What are we going to do? There is nothing revolutionary about intersectionality, however. It is integral to this create yourself subjectivity culture, a kind that shirks communal responsibilities, that is socially reproducing homogenous individuals that are simultaneously producers and consumers. Please see Foucault's 1979 lectures. Academics have been writing about this issue in a variety of ways, but they have to tiptoe around the possibility of cancel culture with an excessive use of jargon. But it is easy to find critiques if you look for it. As a result, the simplest and most marketable versions of intersectional analysis, one that usually glosses over the issue of class, becomes the norm. For example, when the book Preliminary Materials for the Theory of a Young Girl came out years ago, to discuss these very issues, it was immediately derailed as hate speech. Go check out the reviews on Goodreads. I am not defending the patriarchy, but I am doing something that philosophy has always done. Make the side I disagree with stronger. Ironically, there are articles by these neoliberal feminist psychologists saying that the devil's advocate position is a sign of toxic masculinity. Even if we were to concede that the family is indeed a patriarchal household, the patriarchal home and the duty of the patriarch is to defend the home from the endless cost-benefit analysis of the marketplace. It is the duty of the father to provide and the mother to care. These rituals are not dead. They now only exist for a very small group of privileged people, those who can afford it. Meanwhile, all forms of solidarity have been lost in low-income communities, combined with a cancel culture that does not let these communities engage with one another to try to create some sort of communal rapport. Ironically, it is the pre-Ayn Randian Southern hospitality conservatives who realize and set clear limits upon where capitalist religions, with its neoliberal rituals, cannot invade, as in the church and the family. These are the people who usually come out on social media and denounce cultural Marxism. However, the communion that church provides is also under attack by those who spread their ideologies, immune from critique, using the American Psychological Association and the United Nations Human Rights Council, invading the most far-off corners of the world with their Western ideology of neoliberal colonial human rights. See Talal Assad talking about that, while attacking the very concept of love as being a concept created, or at least prefaced, by the patriarchy. Not realizing that when you kill the dream of love, all you are left with is a neoliberal and white supremacist nightmare. While supposed Marxist feminists, when it is really Engelsian feminists, Engels feminists, are stuck still analyzing early industrial capitalist ways of surplus labor through unpaid reproduction, they allow for neoliberal logic of cost-benefit analysis instead to seep into the family itself by destroying the last bastions of care turning all human social relationships into an emotional labor cost-benefit analysis. It's funny because the only people who actually care about that emotion, about making sure that other people aren't overburdened by, let's say, my complaining for the day, those are the only people that are actually affected by this. People who don't care about your emotional labor aren't actually affected by this. They have enough money to have people listen to them all the time. That's why Donald Trump, no matter how terrible he is, he has always a bunch of people there listening to whatever he has to say. Men have realized that that there is only one measure of value and only one religion in this world. And since there is nothing else to strive for, nothing else to put your life on the line for, the only arena that provides any meaning today comes from the circulations of global finance. Ironically, when you go to feminist subreddits, they're like, oh, why do men always care about the finances? Well, it's actually pretty obvious, because now there's only one religion. And in fact, in a way, it's right to say that the finance is male astrology, whereas people who don't have to care about finances actually can just focus on their tarot cards, or even worse, trying to make money off of their tarot cards. Participating in the global religion through these capitalist rituals is the only form of meaning for these people now. The masculine perspective has been cut out from and incapable of discussing with the feminist perspective because of this indoctrination of the men's liberation culture, of which I was a long-term member of, actually. Everywhere neoliberal colonialism goes, its first task is to destroy the traditional kin-based ties that people have. Yes, and those are usually patriarchal, but they replace it with Western neoliberal human rights form of subjectivity. When the French Revolution happened, there was something called the Third Estate. Now, the Third Estate has broken up into the capitalist estate and the Fourth Estate, which is the proletarian classes. And now its goal, because of capitalism, is always looking towards new markets. Its goal is to subsume the Fifth Estate. The Fifth Estate are the villagers, on the margins of society. My people, my cousins, my family. This neoliberal colonialism of the mind needs to destroy these ancient communal and kin-based ties. And in the West, this has taken the form of the destruction of the patriarchal home. In fact, if you refuse to engage in this emotional labor cost-benefit analysis, you are deemed as psychologically unhealthy, just as with the clinicalization of masculinity in general. So you can see that's what gaslighting really means. And I don't like using that word because that's part of the idioms of this neoliberal subjectivity. With the death of the patriarchal home, it was not replaced with any other communal rituals other than the rituals of capitalism. This is because, indeed, privilege is blinding. And this cost-benefit analysis of human interrelationships, and this cost-benefit analysis of human interrelationships is epitomized in the various idiomatic phrases like, it is too much emotional labor to educate you, and I do not owe you anything, and all but have destroyed the spirit of trust in Western communities, or just in communities in general, and given all the power, ironically, to privileged men. All this is sold to us as progressive modes of changing society, but instead bring us further into the dystopic, what is called the dystopic cyberpunk reality. Now we are experiencing the commodification of love and interpersonal relationships and emotional labor, and whether we care about those less fortunate than ourselves has become also a matter of cost-benefit analysis. All community work is too much emotional labor, while volunteering for your community today has become a laughable concept, where once teachers would tell the students that knowledge equals power equals responsibility, we have replaced it today with knowledge equals power equals good luck on your own you do you mentality. Simultaneously, this came with the culture of Internet 2.0 and the death of popular and truly anti-capitalist movements like Nina Paley's "Copyright is not a theft." This fake anti-capitalist ideologies present in this work and others spreads through simplistic idioms throughout the internet and have made a situation where even taking responsibility for your own complicity is now too much emotional labor, aka Roxane Gay. Foucault already made this clear in his work years ago, and today we are merely seeing the fruition of the same processes, where these widely used idiomatic phrases on the internet, oh, what is your love language? Idiomatic phrases which Foucault also points to being as absolutely integral to this whole project. Oh, what is your love language? So, and it wraps itself up as critical thinking and progressive and empowerment, but it only empowers privilege. Such philosophies are created because they have been immune from critique. These ivory towers are immune from critique. Yet, as Hannah Arendt argues, in the noise of the public sphere, the only people worth listening to are those who are willing to put their life on the line. Today, the American Psychological Association has deemed such noble attitudes like putting your life on the line as actually being psychologically unsound. Since nobody is willing to put their life on the line for democracy, while of course many people are willing to put their life on the line for hegemony, so feminism has excluded masculine voices and made this idea of putting your life on the line for something as being enigmatic of toxic masculinity as well. As if there was nothing more important than the sacredness of human life. Agamben here adequately explains how this biopolitical power comes face to face with an old institutional powers of discipline in the modern prison. We need to reformulate Arendt's line for a present where nobody is actually willing to put their life on the line for anything. That is, so we're going to reformulate that. It's not about dying for anything anymore. That is, in a world of Huxleyan dystopia, media noise, the only people worth listening to are those who are willing to risk their social capital / their social credit score, if you're in China. Perfectly made clear by that episode in the prison scene of the Black Mirror episode of Nosedive. The only hope against the onslaught of pseudo-Marxist, Engelsian, feminist neoliberal psychology is authentically Marxist feminist psychoanalysis. See the work Marxism and Psychoanalysis in or against psychology. But before we get there, we need people like Rosenthal to take my critique seriously and perhaps realize their own contributions and complicity more deeply than they have analyzed before, like in this book. In this culture, I doubt whether that will happen, so I personally am embracing for the worst of our dystopian present, which is why I look to the concept of cyberpunk. To conclude, I will refer to Hannah Steinkampf-Frank's article, "Solarpunk is not about pretty aesthetics. It's about the end of capitalism." That's her article, to which, with all due respect, I disagree wholeheartedly with. The concept of solarpunk can and is too easily to be subsumed into an accelerationist dream. It already has been subsumed. That is why someone felt the need to write an article defending it. A defense always comes too late, like how Steven Pinker and Sam Harris were trying to defend the West when it was already dead. People thought that intersectionality itself could be immune from co-option because there was supposedly an inherent class analysis. But the number of exploitative companies, even weapons companies, the APA and the CIA commercial, we saw that, where was I? People thought that intersectionality would be immune from co-option, but there was supposed to be an inherent class analysis. But with a number of exploitative companies, even weapons companies, the APA and the CIA commercial, we saw clearly that intersectionality has become integral to the problem, or part and parcel to neoliberal colonialism. We need to start instead with the worst case scenario. We are already in a cyberpunk or Afro-pessimist reality, and our children's minds have and are already being TikTokified. See Bernard Stiegler's Taking Care of the Youth and the Generation. Just a moment of silence for Bernard Stiegler for his suicide this last 2 years. Thank you for your work, sir. In my view, solarpunk must stay in the realm of the dream world because we have already passed the event horizon and the sea levels are already past the point of no return. See Timothy Morton's hyperobjects. The ship has already sailed. Just look at Elon Musk, who tweets against Bernie Sanders. So if for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, solarpunk is an optimistic imagination of the future. Okay, so there was a time when there were these themes, these novels and books that were being written. The concept of cyberpunk was once created to act as a warning for a dystopian future. Unfortunately, the future is already here. Combined with the ecological devastation, people created the imaginary idea of solarpunk to counter the pessimism of cyberpunk. My interpretation of the above meme is that this bloomer is in fact real life, hooked up to the matrix or daydreaming some fantasy world, while in reality, he is stuck in a cyberpunk world. So cyberpunk is the idea that we need to maintain our imagination in a world where our imagination is being invaded by marketing principles, capitalism, and metaverse Neuralink. But what we also need to start with is this worst case scenario, so we don't create a fantasy dreamland with no way of actually getting there.
This is where we should start feeling at home. Part of our daily perception of reality is that this disappears from our world. When you go to the toilet, shit disappears. You flush it, of course, rationally, you know it's there in canalization and so on. But at a certain level of your most elementary experience, it disappears from your world. But the problem is that trash doesn't disappear. Ecology will slowly turn maybe into a new opium of the masses, the way, as we all know, Marx defined relief. In a way, we are not evolutionary, we are not wired to even imagine something like that. It's in a way unimaginable.
We need to start with the pollution, microplastics, rubble, and trash we already have and are already responsible for. So some subreddits that are good for this are r/no/surf and r/cyberpunk. But I'm not sure how long they'll let me stay on Reddit. I would start with the work of Taking Care of the Youth of Our Generations by Bernard Stiegler. And the other work, of course, is Zuboff's Surveillance Capitalism. Thank you so much.
So I think that what we should do to confront properly the threat of ecological catastrophe is not all this new age stuff to break out of this technological manipulative mold and to found our roots in nature, but on the contrary, to cut off even more these roots in nature. The difficult thing is to find poetry, spirituality in this dimension, to recreate, if not beauty, then aesthetic dimension in things like this, in trash itself. That's the true love of the world. Because what is love? Love is not idealization. Every true lover knows that if you really love a woman or a man, that you don't idealize him or her. Love means that you accept a person with all its failures, stupidities, ugly points, and nonetheless, the person is absolute for you. Everything that makes life worth living, but you see perfection in imperfection itself.
Gaslighting.
And that's how we should learn to love the world. True ecologist loves all this.